You're saying that don't come after this tax avoidance. This is actually a good way to ensure that property is more evenly distributed and men actually use their wives to register property. Look at Delhi. I mean, 4% for women, 6% for men. Gurgaon, 6% for women, 8%. And these two states have just the most terrible record of gender equality. I mean, and the worst cases of violence, isn't it? Pinky Anand, in your own experience, this entire Marriage Act amendment, how critical do you think it is? I mean, in the divorce cases which you see in Indian courts, is it a big struggle today for women to actually get immovable property in their names? Do they all end up with just the maintenance or mostly end up with the maintenance?
They do, Manisha, because ultimately the law only entitles you to maintenance. The only part of assets that you acquire are what you have a right to live in that residence because of the Domestic Violence Act which came about in 2005, before which you did not even have that particular provision. So with that kind of law in hand, all you have a right to is to live in that house. You don't have a right to inherit it. You are not secure. And believe me, the correlation between violence and lack of security or lack of ownership of property is a very distinct one. You pointed out some in Kerala, but aside from that, the very fact that you are insecure, you subjugate yourself. The very fact that you are insecure, the insecurity is promoted by the husband and the in-laws. The very fact that you are insecure, I mean, you'll be treated even worse than you would be if you had some security. And security leads to confidence, security leads to your going outwards, and security really is a complete chain of transactions which you are omitted from if you don't have that.
Ravi Ramo, are you seeing a change? I mean, you have this entire workforce, young India. Of course, we understand that rural India will take a long time to change its land norms, inheritance norms. But at least in cities, are women getting more aware? I mean, I have a family where my mother and her sisters refuse to actually upset the cart by asking for anything from their brother's property, right? So that's a generation gone. I'm sure by my generation things have changed, but can you see in the portfolio that developers are selling a lot many more women coming up or men buying property in the names of women or joint property purchases? Are you seeing that change?
Yeah, absolutely, Manisha. I think we have spent all the time thus far on this program looking at the past and inheritance. We have not touched upon the biggest plus for women in this country. The earners, the women earners. Once the money comes funded, like you were talking about the 4 and 6% stamp duty difference, 6 to 8%, it is going to be fraught with issues, perhaps, violence issues. But here is a clear-cut, large mass of women who are earning for themselves. So what we need is not stamp duty concessions. What we actually need, if we need to see a sea change, is the woman buyer being encouraged to buy her first home. You think the first time woman buyer is a huge segment to which this country hasn't actually applied its thought, both in terms of tax, procedure, as well as the builders giving a product to women alone. I don't mean a product at the end, but the product at the beginning. The source of acquiring a property, the means, is very difficult for a working woman because she has to deal with mostly a system dominated and punctured by men. So it's very difficult for this home buyer, home aspirant who also has a job, who's got a full-time job, to get into this whole system of acquiring a property. So what we perhaps could do with is municipalities with a section which has only women staff dealing with approvals for women. Builders who would have women dealing, perhaps going to their homes in the evenings and providing the opportunities, both in terms of home loans as well as products. Because, a lot of this segment lives alone. So we have got to make the ecosystem for the woman who has the means to be able to acquire the property. And therein lies the whole panacea to this issue. Inheritance, I think, is an issue which just has to get rubbed off with time and attitude. Solving this in India is going to be a huge task. But let's start with the urban Indian single woman who wants to be a first-time home buyer.
Well, we have an entire advertising series, beautiful ad where a woman says, all that I want is a first home. I mean, that ad actually advertising did very, very well. So it's definitely resonating with the younger women. When it's saying, how much of a change do you see? In a time of slow sales, banks definitely have a very, very small discount for women buyers, but I don't see developers doing anything exciting or making it more accessible for women to buy homes. Are you?
No, there has really not been much thought applied by anybody actually onto this segment. And I mean, it's still focused on the family as such. Also, I think that, honestly, the law as such needs to be looked at differently. Like in Goa, we have community property laws. That is something that we need to look at across the country. Once you have community property laws and women become entitled to half the property in a marriage, I think that should bring about a sea change, and that will affect everything. It will affect the way a builder looks at things. It will affect the way the entire society looks at things. So I would think that, a change in the law is very much required it should be done, looked at really seriously.
Okay. Now, if I even look at the home loan figures, Harshroongta, over the last year, I believe the demand for home loans has increased from 15% to 29%. Of this, 5% of the borrowers were single working women. I need to look at the data a little bit more closely. This seems to be a little bit, broad sort of a data, but the sense I get is that 5% of the borrowers were single working women. What about married working women? I mean, that's where I believe, or a non-working women, that's where a big change is needed, isn't it?
I think, Manisha, if the data is correct, I mean 5% single women are the percentage. If it's 5% of the home loan borrowers, that's a great and a very encouraging number. Please remember, just a couple of years ago, that number would be a rounding off number. So I think 5% of a growing market is a pretty good number. The other thing, as Ravi said, let's look at, inheritance laws or other things are big things. There are lots of political discussions around them. It's not going to be an easy thing to do. But what is already happening, women are already earning money. They are entitled to take home loans, maybe certain or entitled to buy property. Maybe they just certainly feel socially, they might feel a little, apprehensive about buying property in their own name. I think some kind of marketing, and in the days when marketing real estate is a clear need, I think what is being suggested, that there be specific products towards women should be there. The other thing that you mentioned, married earning women, I think that's already a trend. Most home loans today, I don't have the data, but most home loans today where the couple is working, typically would be jointly owned and jointly taken loan. So I think that has already happened. I think the discussion is around single women and not earning married women.
Married women. I think that's the biggest class which is missing, and because we don't have digital records, so I couldn't find at least any data to see if there's been a clear increase in the number of registrations where either is joint or at least it's more women. But Pinky Anand, coming back to this big change which is needed in the Hindu marriage law, which essentially entitles women, even if they haven't been working women, to have claim over their husband's property during a divorce. Is there any truth to the naysayers who say this will increase the divorce rate? I mean, that's something which comes up again and time and again, or is this?
Of course, Manisha, it's always possible, because once you give certain rights, you will find people claiming those rights. When you claim those rights, you're going to have disputes arising because you want to claim those rights. So those kind of vicious circles also do start, particularly if women believe that on a divorce they would get an equitable distribution of property. Right now they don't. So for them to walk out of a marriage, A, is not practical. Secondly, morally or socially, it is not advisable. And thirdly, because of tradition, etc. So the only way that women would possibly think of moving out is if they felt that they could get an equitable distribution in property. But having said that, Manisha, I must just come back to one of the other subjects that Harsh was speaking about, to the extent of what the laws will do or have done. It is very well known that either society brings about a change in law or change in law brings about a change in society. So I think this time the ball has rolled with the Hindu Succession Act. The law has been changed. Very well, right now the figures are low, but I am very hopeful that as and when the law gets imbibed, whether by education or whether by teaching people or whether by change of norm or ethos, you will find people coming forth. And that will change society to a dramatic extent. And just lastly, on the aspect of what kind of benefits. So even the stamp duty benefits was a big thing for women to come
I would
forth.
agree.
There was a DDA policy, I remember several years back, which compelled any property to be registered not only in the name of the husband but also the wife. Now that did change things a lot. So these compulsive processes, or let us say where you even turn a blind eye to certain distortions in the system where you're having single working women, but I don't see married working women actually going for single ownerships. That would be joint ownerships, home loans, because of those benefits that they get in taxation. So here you have the entire scenario. You are having a change in society. You are having single working women. You are having married women. I would really exclude in that category because I don't see them going singly. So you are having this entire portfolio which is interesting, and definitely a change in laws which are more submissive to women's rights, or which really promote it, I think would be a very good thing to do.
Absolutely. And I think I'm going to thank everybody here. It's been a very interesting discussion. But, you know, one of the real estate developers was telling me that with that extra interest rebate that you get now on loans which are below 50 lakhs, I think forget everything else. Just give your daughter a flat and a home. Harshroongta, yes or no? At marriage, why not start with?
I think in the developer world, a flat made for women is a flat that's painted pink. I think that's not really a women's flat. I think we need little more work, and I suspect that will be designed by women. For a male, even a progressive male to design a product is rather difficult, because I think any product like that needs to be designed by the women users themselves. And I think that's where we should look at, even among developers now, the women are taking center stage. I'm sure some of them will come up with a product that's much better design than just appeal to somebody to take advantage of a small tax rebate.
I think Harshroongta's comment is one of the most progressive comments. We need more Harshroongtas around.
When I think you're in a pink tie and a pink, I can see a little pocket chief there. So tell me, I mean, finally, big change waiting to happen with more women working. I think just the fact that more and more women are joining the workforce, give it another 5 years and things are likely to change dramatically, isn't it?
Yes, see, because as they are earning, we also need to help them with a push to the law. So things will change, yes, as they become aware of their rights, but in the first place they should have those rights, which is why we are saying that it's very important to change the law and educate them both.
All right, so Pinky Anand, we are all depending on you to take back the word to the party and tell them, please don't put this on the back burner, and this amendment is really needed to give all those women who do add huge amount of economic value through being homemakers, and they also are entitled to property, equal rights to property that their husbands own. Pinky Anand and Ravi Ramu, Harshroongta and Vinay Singh, thanks very much for joining me today. On the other side, a taxing issue, service tax and value-added tax that you're charged on your flat or apartment purchases has become a huge headache, with policy flip-flops and courts interpreting these rules every now and then in a different way. We'll come back to clarify the lawful positions on these taxes and whether you are liable to pay them or not.